Good day, everybody. This is Northeast Aviation Pro with another video on the study guide, written study guide for Powerplant reciprocating only chapters. This is a study guide for the written reciprocating Powerplant chapters. Keep in mind, I have a turbine only Powerplant video out already, so this is the reciprocating one. Okay, let's begin. Chapter 1, Reciprocating Engines. During routine inspection of a reciprocating engine, a deposit of small, bright metallic particles which do not cling to the magnetic drain plug is discovered in the oil sump and on the surface of the oil filter. This condition may be a result of abnormal plane-type bearing wear and is cause for further investigation. What is the purpose of a power check on a reciprocating engine? To determine satisfactory performance. Which of the following conditions would most likely lead to detonation? Use of fuel with too low an octane rating. During overhaul of an engine, a first step of inspection on a crankshaft should be to perform a run-out check. Backfiring through the carburetor generally results from the use of an excessively lean mixture. If the hot clearance is used to set the valves when the engine is cold, what will occur during operation of the engine? The valves will open late and close early. Which bearing is least likely to be a roller or ball bearing? Master rod bearing, radial engine. Explanation: the master rod bearing in a radial engine is always a plain bearing. Engine crankshaft runout is usually checked during engine overhaul and after a prop strike or sudden engine stoppage. How may it be determined that a reciprocating engine with a dry sump is pre-oiled sufficiently? Oil will flow from the engine return line or indicator port. What is the best indication of worn valve guides? High oil consumption. What is the air-fuel mixture ignited in a conventional reciprocating engine? Shortly before the piston reaches the top of the compression stroke. An increase in manifold pressure with a constant RPM will cause the bearing load in an engine to increase. The operating temperature valve clearance of a radial engine as compared to cold valve clearance is greater. When does valve overlap occur in the operation of an aircraft reciprocating engine? At the end of the exhaust stroke and the beginning of the intake stroke. The 5 events of a 4-stroke cycle engine in the order of their occurrence are intake, compression, ignition, power, and exhaust. An unsupercharged aircraft reciprocating engine operated at full throttle from sea level to 10,000 feet, provided the RPM is unchanged, will lose power due to the reduced density of air drawn into the cylinders. If the ignition switch is moved from both to either left or right during an engine ground check, normal operation is usually indicated by slight drop in torque meter pressure indication. What is the basic operational sequence for reducing the power output of an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller. Reduce the manifold pressure, then the RPM. During ground check, an engine is found to be rough running, the magneto drop is normal, and the manifold pressure is higher than the normal for any given RPM. The trouble may be caused by a dead cylinder. The volume of a cylinder equals 70 cubic inches when the piston is at bottom center. When the piston is at top of the cylinder, the volume equals 10 cubic inches. What is the compression ratio? 7:1. Explanation. If the cylinder has a volume of 70 cubic inches with the piston at bottom of its stroke and 10 cubic inches at the top of its stroke, you pretty much get the ratio of 7:1 because it's 70 cubic inches to 10 cubic inches while it's at top dead center. So 7:1. To reduce the power output of an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller and operating near maximum BMEP, the manifold pressure is reduced with the throttle control before the RPM is reduced with the propeller control. Which of the following would most likely cause a reciprocating engine to backfire through the induction system at low RPM operation? Lean mixture. Direct mechanical push-pull carburetor heat control linkages should normally be adjusted so that the stop located on the diverter valve will be contracted before the stop at the control lever is reached in both hot and cold positions. An engine misses in both the right and left position of the magneto switch. The quickest method for locating the trouble is to check for one or more cold cylinders. If metallic particles are found in the oil filter during an inspection, the cause should be identified and corrected before the aircraft is released for flight. How is proper end gap clearance on new piston rings assured during the overhaul of an engine? By placing the rings in a cylinder and measuring the end gap with a feeler gauge. How many of the following are factors in establishing the maximum compression ratio limitations of an aircraft engine? Detonation characteristics of the fuel, design limitations of the engine, and the degree of supercharging. Increased water vapor, higher relative humidity in the incoming air to a reciprocating engine will normally result in which of the following? Decreased engine power at constant RPM and manifold pressure. Some aircraft engine manufacturers equip their product with choked or tapered ground cylinders in order to provide a straight cylinder bore at operating temperatures. What could cause excessive pressure buildup in the crankcase of a reciprocating engine? Plugged crankcase breather. Which condition would be the least likely to be caused by failed or failing engine bearings? Low oil temperatures. When will small induction system air leaks have the most noticeable effect on engine operation? At low RPM. If air-fuel ratio is proper and the ignition timing is correct, the combustion process should be completed just after top dead center at the beginning of the power stroke. During overhaul, the disassembled parts of an engine are usually degreased with some form of mineral spirit solvent rather than water mixed degreasers, primarily because Water mix degreasers residues may cause engine oil contamination in the overhauled engine. What does valve overlap promote? Better scavenging and cooling characteristics. Which of the following is most likely to occur if an overhead valve engine is operated with inadequate valve clearances? The valves will not seat properly during start and engine warm-up. What tool is generally used to measure the crankshaft rotation in degrees? Timing disc. The primary concern in establishing the firing order for an opposed engine is to provide for balance and eliminate vibration to the greatest extent possible. Excessive valve clearances will cause the duration of the valve opening to decrease for both intake and exhaust valves. When cleaning aluminum and magnesium engine parts, it is indivisible to soak them in solutions containing soap because some of the soap will become impregnated in the surface of the material and subsequently cause engine oil contamination and foaming. If the crankshaft runout readings on the dial indicator are plus 0.002 inches and minus 0.003 inches, the runout is 0.005 inches. Explanation: crankshaft runout is measured by clamping a dial indicator to a solid part of the engine and placing the arm of the indicator against the part of the crankshaft where the runout reading is measured. What is the purpose of installing 2 or more springs on each valve in an aircraft engine? To eliminate valve spring vibration or surging. A 9-cylinder engine with a bore of 5.5 inches and a stroke of 6 inches will have a total piston displacement of 1,283 cubic inches. Now, for this question, the numbers may be changed during your test, so you got to know the math behind it. So an area, you got to find the area of, or actually the volume of each cylinder. So, you take the pi times radius squared times the stroke, which will give you the volume, and then the volume times the number of cylinders, and that will give you the amount of piston displacement of the whole engine. So just make sure that on your test, make sure you get that volume right, and you multiply that by the number of cylinders, and you'll get the total piston displacement. An aircraft reciprocating engine using hydraulic valve lifters is observed to have no clearance in its valve operating mechanism after the minimum inlet oil and cylinder head temperatures for takeoff have been reached. When can this condition be expected? During normal operation. Compression ratio is the ratio between the cylinder volume with piston at bottom dead center and at top dead center. What is likely to occur if a reciprocating engine is operated at high power settings before it is properly warmed up? Oil starvation of bearings and other parts. Well, what will be the likely result if the piston ring gaps happen to be aligned when performing a differential pressure compression check on a cylinder? A worn or defective rings indication. Excessive valve clearance results in the valves opening. Excessive valve clearance results in the valves opening late and closing early. The horsepower developed in the cylinders of a reciprocating engine is known as indicated horsepower. If an engine operates with a low oil pressure and a high oil temperature, the problem may be caused by leaking oil dilution valve. 1 or 2, or both. Number 1, cast iron piston rings may be used in chrome-plated cylinders. True. Chrome-plated rings may be used in plain steel cylinders. True. Both number 1 and 2 are true. Ignition occurs at 28 degrees before top dead center on a certain 4-stroke cylinder engine, and the intake valve opens at 15 degrees before top dead center. How many degrees of the crankshaft travel after ignition does the intake valve open? Consider one cylinder only. 373 degrees. Explanation. The crankshaft rotates 28 degrees on the compression stroke after the ignition occurs. The crankshaft rotates 180 degrees on the power stroke. The crankshaft rotates 165 degrees on the exhaust stroke before the intake valve opens. The total crankshaft rotation between the time ignition occurs and the time the intake valve opens is 28 degrees plus 180 degrees plus 165 degrees, which gives you a total of 373 degrees. The valve clearance of an engine using hydraulic lifters when the lifters are completely flat or empty should not exceed a specified amount above 0. Which one of these is true? Number 1, pre-ignition is caused by improper ignition timing. False. Number 2, detonation occurs when an area of the combustion chamber becomes incandescent and ignites the air-fuel mixture in advance of normal timed ignition. False. Neither 1 or 2 is true. By the use of differential pressure compression tester, it is determined that cylinder 3 of a 9-cylinder radial engine will not hold pressure after the crankshaft has been rotated 260 degrees from top dead center compression stroke cylinder 1. How can this indication be usually interpreted? A normal indication. One of the best indicators of reciprocating engine combustion chamber problems is the spark plug condition. During the inspection of an engine control system in which push-pull control rods are used, the threaded rod ends should be checked for the amount of thread engagement by means of the inspection holes. If air is heard coming from the crankcase breather or oil filler during a differential compression check, what is this an indication of? Piston ring leakage. What is the principal advantage of using propeller reduction gears? To enable the engine RPM to be increased with an accompanying increase in power and allow the propeller to remain at a lower, more efficient RPM. Excessive valve clearance in a piston engine decreases valve overlap. Which of the following engine servicing operations generally require engine pre-oiling prior to starting the engine? Engine installation. A characteristics of a dynafocal engine mount as applied to aircraft reciprocating engines is that the shock mounts point towards the engine's center of gravity. What is an advantage of using metallic sodium-filled exhaust valves in aircraft recip engines? Reduce valve operating temperatures. A condition that can occur in radial engines but is unlikely to occur in horizontally opposed engines is hydraulic lock. Which of the following will decrease volumetric efficiency in a reciprocating engine? Improper valve timing, sharp bends in the induction system, and high carburetor air temperatures. Which air-fuel mixture will result in the highest engine temperature, all other factors remaining constant? A mixture leaner than a manual lean mixture of 0.060. What special procedure must be followed when adjusting the valves of an engine equipped with a floating cam ring? Eliminate cam bearing clearance when making valve adjustment. A hissing sound from the exhaust stacks when a propeller is being pulled through manually indicates exhaust valve blow-by. Which types of bearings are generally used for connecting rods and camshafts? Plain. On which strokes are both valves on a 4-stroke cycle reciprocating engine open? Exhaust and intake. Which statement is true regarding bearings used in a high-powered reciprocating aircraft engine? There is less rolling friction when ball bearings are used than when roller bearings are employed. If the oil pressure gauge fluctuates over a wide range from 0 to normal operating pressure, the most likely cause is low oil supply. If the oil pressure of a cold engine is higher than the normal operating temperatures, the engine's lubrication system is probably operating normally. At what speed must a crankshaft turn if each cylinder of a 4-stroke cycle engine is to be fired 200 times a minute? 400 RPM. Explanation: each cylinder in a 4-stroke cycle engine fires every other revolution of the crankshaft. If an engine with a stroke of 6 inches is operated at 2000 RPM, the piston movement within the cylinder will be at maximum velocity 90 degrees after top dead center. Engine operating flexibility is the ability of an engine to run smoothly and give the desired performance at all speeds. Why does the smoothness of operation of an engine increase with a greater number of cylinders? The power impulses are spaced closer together. Which of the following is a characteristic of a thrust bearing used in most radial engines? Deep groove ball. To what altitude will a turbocharged engine maintain sea level pressure? Critical altitude. Valve clearance changes in opposed type engines using hydraulic lifters are accomplished by push rod replacement. What is required by 14 CFR Part 43 Appendix D while performing an annual / 100-hour inspection on a Recip aircraft? Cylinder compression check. Which of the following conditions will cause an engine to have an increased tendency to detonate? High manifold pressure or high intake air temperature. After spark plugs from an opposed engine have been serviced, in what position should they be reinstalled? Next in firing order to the one from which they were removed and swapped from bottom to top. The actual power delivered to the propeller of an aircraft engine is called brake horsepower. Which of the following will be caused by excessive valve clearance on a cylinder on a reciprocating aircraft engine? Reduced valve overlap period. Some cylinder barrels are hardened by nitriding. As the pressure is applied during a reciprocating engine compression check using a differential pressure tester, what would a movement of the propeller in the direction of engine rotation indicate? The piston was positioned past top dead center. Valve overlap is defined as the number of degrees of crankshaft travel during which both valves are off their seat. One cause of afterfiring in an aircraft engine is an excessively rich mixture. If an engine cylinder is to be removed, at what position in the cylinder should the piston be? Top dead center. Which statement is correct regarding a 4-stroke cycle aircraft engine? The intake valve closes on the compression stroke. Which statement pertaining to the air-fuel ratios is true? The mixture ratio which gives the best power is richer than the mixture ratio which gives maximum economy. Grinding the valves of a reciprocating engine to feather edge is likely to result in pre-ignition and burnt valves. What is the purpose of the safety circlet installed on some valve stems? To prevent valves from falling into the combustion chamber. The primary purpose in setting proper valve timing and overlap is to obtain the best volumetric efficiency and lower cylinder operating temperatures. Reduced air density at high altitude has a decided effect on carburation, resulting in a reduction of engine power by excessively enriching the fuel-air mixture. If the exhaust valve of a 4-stroke cycle engine is closed and the intake valve is just closed, the piston is on the compression stroke. The floating control thermostat used on some reciprocating engine installations helps regulate oil temperature by controlling the airflow through the oil cooler. Full floating piston pins are those which allow motion between the pin and both the piston and the small end of the connecting rod. During overhaul, reciprocating engine exhaust valves are checked for stretch with a contour or radius gauge. If the intake valve is opened too early in the cycle of operation of a 4-stroke cycle engine, it may result in backfiring into the induction system. Which of the following would indicate a general weak engine condition when operated with a fixed pitch propeller or test club? Lower than normal static RPM full throttle operation. Campground pistons are installed in some aircraft engines to provide a better fit at operating temperatures. On which part of the cylinder walls of a normally operating engine will the greatest amount of wear occur? Near the top of the cylinder. Standard aircraft cylinder oversizes usually range from 0.01 inch to 0.03 inches. Oversize on automobile engine cylinders may range up to 0.1 inches. This is because aircraft engine cylinders have relatively thin walls and may be nitrided. Which statement is correct regarding the engine crankshafts? Movable counterweights serve to reduce the torsional vibrations in an aircraft reciprocating engine. Before attempting to start a radial engine that has been shut down for more than 30 minutes, turn the propeller by hand 3 to 4 revolutions in the normal direction of rotation to check for liquid lock. This is the end of the Reciprocating Engines chapter in the Recip only chapter section of the written test. Engine Inspections chapter. A severe condition of chafing or fretting in which a transfer of metal from one part to another occurs is called galling. What publication is used for guidance to determine whether a power plant repair is a major or minor? 14 CFR Part 43. What maintenance records are required following a major repair of an aircraft engine? Entries in the Engine Maintenance Record and FAA Form 337. How is the flow range of the fuel discharge nozzles installed in a fuel-injected reciprocating engine indicated? By a letter stamped on the hex of the nozzle body. Each power plant installed on an airplane with a standard airworthiness certificate must have been type certified. Select the Airworthiness Directive applicability statement which applies to an IVO-355 engine serial number T8164 with 2100 hours total time and 300 hours since rebuilding. Applies to all IVO-355 engines serial number T8000 through T8300 less than 2400 hours total time. The airworthiness standards for the issue of type certificates for small airplanes with 9 or less passenger seats in the normal, utility, and acrobatic categories may be found in the 14 CFR Part 23. Which of the following contains a table that lists the engines to which a given propeller is adaptable? Propeller type certificate data sheets. Where would one find type design information for a R1830-92 engine certificated under the Civil Air Regulations CAR and installed on a DC-3? The aircraft engine specifications. When inspecting an aircraft reciprocating engine, what document is used to determine if the proper magnetos are installed? Aircraft engine specifications or type certificate data sheet. Which of the following contains approved data for performing a major repair to an aircraft engine? Manufacturer's maintenance instructions 1 FAA approved. Which of the following contains a minimum checklist for 100-hour inspections of engines? 14 CFR Part 43 Appendix D. When must an Airworthiness Directive AD be complied with after it becomes effective? As specified in the AD. On a reciprocating engine aircraft using a shroud exhaust muffler system as a source for cabin heat, the exhaust system should be visually inspected for any indication of cracks, or an operational carbon monoxide detection test should be done. A service bulletin must be complied with only when referred to in an airworthiness directive. The breaking loose of small pieces of metal from coated surfaces, usually caused by defective plating or excessive loads, is called flaking. Which of the following can inspect and approve an engine major repair for return to service? Certificated mechanic with an inspection authorization. You are performing a 100-hour inspection on an R985-22 aircraft engine. What does the 985 indicate? The total piston displacement of the engine. Which one of these is true? Number 1 or number 2? Number 1, airworthiness directives are federal aviation regulations and must be complied with unless specific exemption is granted. Number 2, airworthiness directives of an emergency nature may require immediate compliance upon receipt. Regarding the above statements, both number 1 and number 2 are true. A ground incident that results in a propeller's sudden stoppage would require a crankshaft runout inspection. What publication would be used to obtain crankshaft runout tolerance? Current manufacturer's maintenance instructions. Indentations on bearing races caused by high static loads are known as brinelling. Straightening nitrided crankshafts is not recommended. A Cessna 180 aircraft has a Macaulay propeller number 2A34C50/90A. The propeller is severely damaged in a ground accident, and this model propeller is not available for replacement. Which of the following should be used to find an approved alternative replacement? Aircraft specifications/type certificate data sheets. Which of the following component inspections is to be accomplished on a 100-hour inspection? Check cylinder compression. What section in the instructions for continued airworthiness is FAA approved? Airworthiness limitations section. That's the end of engine inspections chapter. Engine instrument systems chapter. Which statement is true regarding a thermocouple type cylinder head temperature measuring system? The voltage output of a thermocouple system is determined by the temperature difference between the two ends of the thermocouple. Instruments that provide readings of low or negative pressure, such as manifold pressure gauges, are usually what type? Diaphragm or bellows. The thermocouple leads used to measure cylinder temperature on an aircraft Recip engine are connected to the electrical wiring on one end and the cylinder on the other end. On a twin-engine aircraft with fuel-injected Recip engines, one fuel flow meter reads considerably higher than the other in all engine operating configurations. What is the probable cause of this indication? One or more fuel nozzles are clogged. Where are the hot and cold junctions located in an engine cylinder temperature indicating systems? The hot junction is located at the cylinder and the cold junction is located at the instrument. The indication on a thermocouple type cylinder head temperature indicator is produced by a current generated by the temperature difference between dissimilar metal hot and cold junctions. What does the blue arc on a cylinder head temperature CHT gauge represent? The range within which operation is permitted in auto lean. A manifold pressure gauge is designed to indicate absolute pressure in the intake manifold. Which statement is correct concerning a thermocouple thermocouple type temperature indicating instrument system. It requires no external power source. Which of the following types of electric motors are commonly used in electric tachometers? Synchronous motors. The EGT gauge used with reciprocating engines is primarily used to furnish temperature readings in order to obtain the best mixture setting for fuel efficiency. The RPM indication of a synchronous AC motor tachometer is governed by the generator frequency. An indication of unregulated power changes that result in continual drift of manifold pressure indication on a turbo-supercharged aircraft engine is known as bootstrapping. What unit in a tachometer system sends information to the indicator? The three-phase AC generator. Thermocouple leads are designed for a specific installation and may not be altered. Instruments that measure relatively high fluid pressures, such as oil pressure gauges, are usually what type? Bourdon tube. Which of the following instrument discrepancies require replacement of the instrument? Glass cracked, will not zero out, pointer loose on shaft, fogged. Which of these is true? 1 or 2? Number 1. Powerplant instrument range markings show whether the current state of powerplant operation is normal, acceptable for a limited time, or unauthorized. That is true. Number 2. Powerplant instrument range markings are based on installed engine operating limits, which may not exceed but are not necessarily equal to those limits shown on the engine type certificate datasheet. Also true. Both number 1 and number 2 are true. Why do helicopters require a minimum of 2 synchronous tachometer systems? One indicates the engine RPM and the other indicates the main rotor RPM. A red triangle, dot, or diamond mark on an engine instrument face or glass indicates the maximum limit for high transients such as starting. A common type of electrically operated oil temperature gauge utilizes either a Wheatstone bridge or ratiometer circuit. What basic meter is used to indicate cylinder head temperature in most aircraft? Galvanometer. The fuel flow meter used with a continuous fuel injection system installed on an aircraft horizontally opposed Recip engines measures the fuel pressure drop across the fuel nozzles. Which unit most accurately indicates fuel consumption of a Recip engine? Fuel flow meter. A change in engine manifold pressure has a direct effect on the mean effective cylinder pressure. Engine oil temperature gauges indicate the temperature of the oil entering the engine. If the thermocouple leads were inadvertently crossed at installation, what would the cylinder temperature gauge pointer indicate? It moves off scale on the 0 side of the meter. In addition to the fuel quantity, a computerized fuel system with a totalizer indicator provides indication of how many of the following. The CFS computerized fuel system provides the pilot with fuel flow information in pounds per hour or gallons per hour, gallons or pounds remaining, time remaining for flight at the current power settings, and gallons used from the initial engine startup. A Bourdon tube instrument may be used to indicate pressure and temperature. The fuel flow indication system used with many fuel-injected opposed engine airplanes utilize a measure of fuel pressure. An electronic system that monitors engine and airframe parameters and does not utilize traditional engine gauges is called an engine indicating and crew alerting system, EICAS. In an aircraft equipped with a pressure drop type fuel flow indicating system, if one of the injector nozzles become restricted, this would cause a decrease in fuel flow with an increased fuel flow indication on the gauge. The purpose of an exhaust gas analyzer is to indicate the fuel-air ratio being burned in the cylinders. Which of the following instrument conditions is acceptable and not required immediate correction? Case paint chipped. A complete break in the line between the manifold pressure gauge and the induction system will be indicated by the gauge registering prevailing atmospheric pressure. Basically, the indicator of a tachometer system is responsive to change in frequency. Which of the following is a primary engine instrument? Tachometer. The principal fault in the pressure type fuel flow meter indicating system installed on a horizontally opposed continuous flow fuel injected aircraft Recip engine is that a plugged fuel injection nozzle will cause a higher than normal fuel flow indication. This is the end of Engine Instruments chapter. Engine Fire Protection System chapter. How does carbon dioxide, CO2 extinguish an aircraft engine fire? Contact with the air converts the liquid into snow and gas, which smothers the flame. What is the operating principle of the spot detector sensor in a fire detection system? A bimetallic thermal switch that closes when heated to a high temperature. The most satisfactory extinguishing agent for an electrical fire is carbon dioxide. Why does one type of fan wall fire detection system use spot detectors wired in parallel between two separate circuits? So that a single fault may exist in the system without sounding a false alarm. Which statement best describes the blowout type indicator disc on a fixed fire extinguishing system? When the yellow indicator disc is missing, it indicates the fire extinguishing system has been normally discharged. A fuel or oil fire is defined as a Class B fire. A fire involving energized electrical equipment is defined as a Class C fire. Which of the following fire detection systems are commonly used in an engine nacelle? KID continuous loop. For fire detection and extinguishing purposes, aircraft power plant areas are divided into fire zones based on the volume and smoothness of the airflow through the engine compartments. A fire detection system operates on the principle of a buildup of gas pressure within a tube proportional to temperature. Which of the following systems does this statement define? Lindbergh continuous element system. How is the fire extinguishing agent distributed in the engine section? Spray nozzles and perforated tubing. The fire detection system that uses a single wire surrounded by a continuous string of ceramic beads in a tube is the Fenwal system. The most common type of portable fire extinguisher available on the ramp to fight fires on the exterior of aircraft uses what type of extinguishing agent? Carbon dioxide. 2 continuous loop fire detection systems that will not test due to broken detector element are the Kitty system and the Fenwal system. A fire detection system that operates on the rate of temperature rise is a thermocouple system. The most satisfactory extinguishing agent for a tailpipe or intake fire is carbon dioxide. Which of the following is not used to detect fires in a Recip engine nacelle? Smoke detectors. What is the function of a fire detection system? To activate a warning device in the event of powerplant fire. A continuous loop fire detector is what type of detector? Overheat detector. Which of the following fire detection systems use heat in the normal testing of the system? The thermocouple system and the Lindbergh system. What is the principle of operation of the continuous loop fire detector system sensor? Core resistance material which prevents current flow at normal temperatures. The fire detection system that uses 2 wires embedded in a ceramic core within a tube is the Kitty system. Which of the following fire detection systems measures temperature rise compared to a reference temperature? Thermocouple. Which of the following is the safest fire extinguishing agent to use from a standpoint of toxicity and corrosion hazards? Halon 1301. After a fire is extinguished or overheat condition is removed in aircraft equipped with a Cistron Donner fire detector, the detection system automatically resets. Which of the following fire detection systems will detect a fire when an element is inoperative but will not test when the test circuit is energized? The Kitty system and the Fenwal system. The use of water on Class D fires will cause the fire to burn more violently and cause explosions. End of engine fire protection systems. Engine Electrical Systems Chapter. Which FAA regulation specifies that each resettable circuit protective device requires a manual operation to restore service after the device has interrupted the circuit? 14 CFR Part 23. The most effective method of regulating aircraft direct current generator output is to vary, according to the load requirements, the strength of the stationary field. If a generator is malfunctioning, its voltage can be reduced to residual by actuating the generator master switch. In order to reduce the possibility of ground shorting the circuits when the connectors are separated for maintenance, the AN and MS electrical connectors should be installed with the pin section on the ground side of the electrical circuit. The generating system of an aircraft charges the battery by using constant voltage and varying current. Bonding jumpers should be designed and installed in such a manner that they provide a low electrical resistance in the ground circuit. Alternators, AC generators that are driven by a constant speed CSD mechanism are used to regulate the alternator to a constant Hertz output. The reason for flashing the field in a generator is to restore residual magnetism to the field frame. According to the electron theory of the flow of electricity, when a properly functioning DC alternator and voltage regulating system is charging an aircraft's battery, the direction of current flow through the battery is into the negative terminal and out the positive terminal. What is the frequency of most aircraft alternating current? 400 Hertz. A high surge of current is required when a DC electrical motor is first started. As the speed of the motor increases, the counter EMF builds up and opposes the applied EMF, thus reducing the current flow through the armature. Which of the following is regulated in a generator to control its voltage output? The strength of the field. What are two types of AC motors that are used to produce a relatively high torque? Three-phase induction and capacitor start. Aircraft copper electrical wire is coated with tin, silver, or nickel in order to prevent oxidation. The maximum number of terminals that may be connected to any one terminal stud in an aircraft electrical system is 4. Starter brushes should be replaced when they are worn down to 1/2 of the original length. The maximum allowable voltage drop between the generator and the bus bar is 2% of the regulated voltage. Which of the following FAA regulations require that all aircraft using fuses as the circuit protective device carry 1 spare set of fuses or 3 spare fuses of each kind required? 14 CFR Part 91. As the generator load is increased within its rated capacity, the voltage will remain constant and the amperage output will increase. The resistance of the aircraft return path through the aircraft is always considered negligible, provided the structure is adequately bonded. Which FAA reg requirement prevents the use of automatic reset circuit breakers? 14 CFR Part 23. Which of the following is true? 1 or 2? 1. Electrical circuit protection devices are rated based on the amount of current that can be carried without overheating the wiring insulation. True. Number 2. A trip-free circuit breaker makes it impossible to manually hold the circuit closed when excessive current is flowing. That is also true. Both 1 and 2 are true. On-off 2-position engine electrical switches should be installed so the on position is reached by a forward or upward motion. What is the maximum number of bonding jumper wires that may be attached to one terminal ground to a flat surface? 4. Which of these is true? Number 1 or number 2? 1. Most modern aircraft use circuit breakers rather than fuses to protect their electrical circuits. That is true. Number 2. Part 23 requires that all electrical circuits incorporate some form of electrical circuit protective device. That is false. What precaution is usually taken to prevent electrolyte from freezing in a lead-acid battery? Keep the battery fully charged. Why is it unnecessary to flash the field of the exciter on a brushless alternator? Permanent magnets are installed in the main field poles. As the flux density in a field of a DC generator increases and the current flow to the system increases, the force required to turn the generator increases. Aircraft wire size is determined by using a wire gauge. Arcing at the brushes and burning of the commutator of a motor may be caused by weak brush springs. What speed must an 8-pole AC generator turn to produce 400 Hz AC? 6,000 RPM. The constant current method of charging a NiCad battery is the method most effective in maintaining cell balance. The part of a DC alternator power system that prevents reverse flow of current from the battery to the alternator is the rectifier. What is the smallest terminal stud allowed for aircraft electrical power systems? Number 10. A term commonly used when two or more electrical terminals are installed on a single lug of a terminal strip is stacking. What is the purpose of a reverse current cutout relay? It opens the main generator circuit whenever the generator voltage drops below the battery voltage. Electrical switches are rated according to the voltage and the current they can control. If the points in a vibrator type voltage regulator stick in the closed position while the generator is operating, what will be the probable result? Generator output voltage will increase. Aircraft that operate more than one generator connected to a common electrical system must be provided with individual generator switches that can be operated from the cockpit during flight. Aircraft electrical wire is manufactured in sizes according to a standard known as American wire gauge. What is used to polish commutators or slip rings? 00 sandpaper. When a 28-volt, 75-ampere generator is installed on an aircraft, an electrical load analysis ground check is performed and it is determined that the battery is furnishing 57 amperes to the system. With all the electrical equipment operating, this indicates the load will be within the generator load limits. When installing an electrical switch, under which of the following conditions should the switch be derated from its nominal current rating? Direct current motor circuits. Electric motors are often classified according to the method of connecting the field coils and armature. Aircraft engine starter motors are generally of which type? Series. What device is used to convert alternating current which has been induced in the loops of a rotating armature of a DC generator to direct current? A commutator. How many hours will a 140 amp hour battery deliver 15 amperes? 9.33 hours. When selecting an electrical switch for installation in an aircraft circuit utilizing a direct current motor, a derating factor should be applied. Which of the following aircraft circuits do not contain a fuse/circuit breaker? Starter circuit. What type of lubricant may be used to aid in pulling electrical wires or cables through conduits? Soapstone talc. What is the amp-hour rating of a storage battery that is designed to deliver 45 amps for 2.5 hours? 112.5 amp hours. How are the rotor windings of an aircraft alternator usually excited? By a variable direct current. A typical barrier-type aircraft terminal strip is made of paper-based phenolic compound. The stationary field strength in a direct current generator is varied according to the load requirements. Generator voltage will not build up when the field is flashed and solder is found on the brush cover plate. These are most likely indications of an open armature. Upon what does the output frequency of an AC generator alternator depend on? The speed of rotation and the number of field poles. How many basic types of circuit breakers are used in power plant installation electrical systems? 3. When does current flow through the coil of a solenoid operated electrical switch? Continually, as long as the control circuit is complete. Which of the following is true? 1 or 2. Number 1, alternators are rated in volt amps, which is a measure of the apparent power being produced by the generator. Number 2, alternating current has the advantage over direct current in that its voltage and current can easily be stepped up or down. Both number 1 and number 2 are true. Which of the following is true? Number 1, electrical wires larger than 10 gauge use uninsulated terminals. That is true. Number 2, electrical wires smaller than 10 gauge use uninsulated terminals. That is false. When installing electrical wiring parallel to a fuel line, the wiring should be above the fuel line. What type of electrical motor is generally used with a direct cranking engine starter? Direct current series wound motor. The time/current capacities of a circuit breaker or fuse must be below those of the associated conductor. Electrical circuit protection devices are installed primarily to protect the wiring. A certain direct current series motor mounted within an aircraft draws more amps during start than when it is running under its rated load. The most logical conclusion that may be drawn is the condition is normal for the type of motor. End of engine electrical systems. Engine lubrication system questions. Which of the following helps determine the proper grade of oil to use in a particular engine? Operating speeds of bearings. What type of oil do most engine manufacturers recommend after new Recip engine break-in? Ashless dispersant oil. The main oil filters strain the oil at which point in the system, just as it leaves the pressure pump. What is the purpose of the check valve generally used in a dry sump lubrication system? to prevent the oil from the supply tank from seeping into the crankcase during inoperative periods. The engine oil temperature regulator is usually located between which of the following on a dry sump Recip engine: the scavenger pump outlet and the oil storage tank. What will be the result of operating an engine in extremely high temperatures using a lubricant recommended by the manufacturer for a much lower temperature? The oil pressure will be lower than normal. The viscosity of a liquid is a measure of its resistance to flow. At cruise RPM, some oil will flow through the relief valve of a gear-type engine oil pump. This is normal, as the relief valve is set at a pressure which is lower than the pressure pump capabilities. Where is the oil of a dry sump Recip engine exposed to the temperature control valve sensing unit? Oil cooler inlet. Which of the following lubrication system components is never located between the pressure pump and the engine pressure system? Fuel line for oil dilution system. Specific gravity specific gravity is a comparison of the weight of a substance to the weight of an equal volume of distilled water at a specific temperature. What is the source of most of the heat that is absorbed by a lubrication oil in a Recip engine? Pistons and cylinder walls. An oil tank having a capacity of 5 gallons must have an expansion space of 2 quarts. A drop in oil pressure may be caused by foreign material under the relief valve. The time in seconds required for exactly 60 cubic centimeters of oil to flow through an accurately calibrated orifice at a specific temperature is recorded as a measurement of the oil's viscosity. Some larger Recip engines use a compensating oil pressure relief valve to provide a high engine oil pressure when the oil is cold and automatically lower the oil pressure when the oil warms up. How is the oil collected by the piston oil ring returned to the crankcase? Through holes drilled in the piston oil ring groove. In order to relieve excessive pump pressure in an engine's internal oil system, most engines are equipped with a relief valve. How are the piston pins of most aircraft engines lubricated? By oil which is sprayed or thrown by the master or connecting rods. Oil accumulation in the cylinders of an inverted inline engine and in the lower cylinders of a radial engine is normally reduced or prevented by extended cylinder skirts. Oil tank fillers on Recip engines are marked with the word oil in accordance with 14 CFR Part 25. Which of the following bearing types must be continuously lubricated by pressure oil? Plain. Which of the following has the greatest effect of the viscosity of lubricating oil? Temperature. Why is an aircraft Recip engine oil tank on a dry sump lubrication system equipped with a vent line? To prevent pressure buildup in the oil tank. What unit in an aircraft's engine lubrication system is adjusted to maintain the desired system pressure? Oil pressure relief valve. The purpose of the flow control valve in a Recip engine oil system is to direct oil through or around the oil cooler. In a Recip engine oil system, the temperature bulb senses oil temperature at a point after the oil has passed through the oil cooler. The valve assemblies of an opposed Recip engine are lubricated by means of a pressure system. As an aid to cold weather starting, the oil dilution system thins the oil with gasoline. What type of oil do most engine manufacturers recommend for new Recip engines break-in? Straight mineral oil. Cylinder walls are usually lubricated by splashed or sprayed oil. How are the teeth of gears in the accessory section of an engine normally lubricated? By splashed or sprayed oil. Which of the following factors has the least effect on the oil consumption of a specific engine? Mechanical efficiency. Which of the following prevents oil from entering the main accessory case when the engine is not running? Check valve. Where are sludge chambers when used in aircraft engine lubrication systems usually located? In the crankshaft throws. In which of the following situations will the oil cooler automatic bypass valve be open the greatest amount? Engine oil below normal operating temperatures. An engine lubrication system pressure relief valve is usually located between the pump and the internal oil system. What determines the minimum particle size which will be excluded or filtered by a Kuno stacked disc edge filtration filter? The spacer thickness. What will result if an oil filter becomes completely blocked? Oil will flow at the normal rate through the system. Why is expansion space required in an engine oil supply tank? For oil enlargement and collection of foam. Under which of the following conditions is the oil cooler flow control valve open on a Recip engine? When the temperature of the oil returning from the engine is too low. An oil separator is generally associated with which of the following? Engine-driven vacuum pump. Excessive oil is prevented from accumulating on the cylinder walls of a Recip engine by oil control rings on the pistons. Upon what quality or characteristic of a lubricating oil is its viscosity index based? It is the rate of change in viscosity with temperature change. If an oil in an oil cooler core and annular jacket becomes congealed, what unit prevents damage to the cooler? Surge protection valve. Which of the following is true? 1 or 2. Number 1, gas turbine and Recip engine oils can be mixed or used interchangeably. That is false. Number 2, most gas turbine engine oils are synthetic. That is true. As a general rule, the mixture setting on a Recip engine operating at or near takeoff power that provides the best cooling is full rich. The primary source of oil contamination in a normally operating Recip engine is combustion deposits due to combustion chamber blow-by and oil mitigation on the cylinder walls. In order to maintain a constant oil pressure as the clearances between the moving parts of an engine increase through normal wear, the supply pump output remains relatively constant at a given RPM, with less oil being returned to the pump inlet by the relief valve. If all the other requirements can be met, what type of oil should be used to achieve theoretically perfect engine lubrication? The thinnest oil that will stay in place and maintain a reasonable film strength. In a Recip engine, oil is directed from the pressure relief valve to the inlet side of the pressure pump. The pumping capacity of the scavenger pump in a dry sump aircraft engine's lubrication system is greater than the capacity of the oil supply pump. The oil used in Recip engines has a relatively high viscosity due to large clearances and high operating temperatures. The basic oil pressure relief valve setting for a newly overhauled engine is made in the overhaul shop. Lubricating oils with high viscosity index ratings are oils in which the viscosity does not vary much with temperature change. What is the primary purpose of the hopper located in the oil supply tank of some dry sump engine installations? To reduce the time required to warm the oil to operating temperatures. High tooth pressures and high rubbing velocities, such as occur with spur-type gears, require the use of an EP lubricant. Compared to Recip engine oils, the type of oils used in turbine engines have less tendency to produce lacquer or coke. The vent line connecting the oil supply tank and the engine in some dry sump engine installations permits the oil tank to be vented through the normal engine vent. Where is the oil temperature bulb located on a dry sump Recip engine? Oil inlet line. Low oil pressure can be detrimental to the internals engine components. However, high oil pressure should be limited to the engine's manufacturer's recommendations. What prevents pressure within this lubricating oil tank from rising above or falling below ambient pressure? Oil tank vent. If an oil filter element becomes completely clogged, the bypass valve will open and the oil pump will supply unfiltered oil. What will happen to the return oil if the oil line between the scavenger pump and the oil cooler separates? The return oil will be pumped overboard. What advantage do mineral-based lubricants have over vegetable oil-based lubricants when used in aircraft engines? Chemical stability. What is the primary purpose of changing aircraft engine lubricating oils at predetermined periods? The oil becomes contaminated with moisture, acids, and finely divided suspended solid particles. The recommended aircraft engine lubricants are mineral or synthetic based. End of engine lubricating system. Start of engine exhaust and reverser systems. Compared to normally aspirated engines, turbocharged engine exhaust systems operate at high temperatures and higher pressures. What is the purpose of a slip joint in an exhaust collector ring? It aids in alignment and absorbs expansion. What is high nickel chromium steel used in many exhaust systems? Corrosion resistance and low expansion coefficient. Repair of exhaust system components is not recommended to be accomplished in the field. Recip engine exhaust systems Designs commonly used to provide for ease of installation and or allow for expansion and contraction may include the use of spring-loaded ball joints, slip joints, and bellows. Sodium-filled valves are advantageous to an aviation engine because they dissipate heat well. How many Recip engine exhaust system leaks can be detected? Signs of exhaust soot inside cowling and on adjacent components. What could be a result of undetected exhaust system leaks in a Recip engine powered airplane? Pilot/passenger incapacitation caused by carbon monoxide entering the cabin. Recip engine exhaust systems that have repairs or sloppy weld beads which protrude internally are unacceptable because they can cause local hotspots. Augmenter tubes are part of which Recip engine system? Exhaust. How should ceramic coated exhaust components be cleaned? By degreasing. Power recovery turbines are used on some Recip engines are driven by the velocity of the exhaust gases. All of the following are recommended markers for Recip engine exhaust systems except lead pencil. On an aircraft that utilizes an exhaust heat exchanger as a source of cabin heat, how should the exhaust system be inspected? With the heater air shroud removed. Most exhaust system failures result from thermal fatigue cracking in the areas of stress concentration. This condition is usually caused by the high temperatures at which the exhaust system operates. Select a characteristic of a good weld on exhaust stacks. The weld should be tapered off smoothly into the base metal. How should corrosion-resistant steel parts such as exhaust collectors be blast cleaned? Use sand which has not previously been used on iron or steel. How do the turbines, which are driven by the exhaust gases of a turbo compound engine, contribute to the total engine power output? By driving the crankshaft through suitable couplings. Dislodged internal muffler baffles on a small Recip engine may cause excessive exhaust back pressure. What is the purpose of an exhaust outlet guard on a small Recip engine? To prevent dislodged muffler baffles from obstructing the muffler outlet. What type of nuts are used to hold an exhaust system to the cylinders? Brass or heat-resistant nuts. Ball joints in Recip engine exhaust systems should be loose enough to permit some movement. End of engine exhaust and reverser systems. Ignition and starting systems chapter. What are two parts of a distributor in an aircraft engine ignition system? Block and rotor. If staggered ignition timing is used, the spark plug nearest the exhaust valve will fire first. The spark occurs at the spark plug when the ignition's primary circuit is broken. How many secondary coils are required in a low-tension ignition system on an 18-cylinder engine? 36. At what RPM is a Recip engine ignition switch check made? The slowest possible RPM. A spark plug's heat range is the result of its ability to transfer heat from the firing end of the spark plug to the cylinder head. Failure of an engine to cease firing after turning the magneto switch off is an indication of an open P lead to ground. What will be the effect if the spark plugs are gapped too wide? Hard starting. What is the radial location of the two north poles of a 4-pole rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto? 180 degrees apart. Which of the following breaker point characteristics is associated with a faulty capacitor? Coarse grained. Spark plug heat range is determined by its ability to transfer heat to the cylinder head. The secondary coil of a magneto is grounded through the primary coil. If the ground wire of a magneto is disconnected at the ignition switch, the result will be engine will not stop running when the ignition switch is turned off. When a shower of sparks ignition system is activated at an engine start, a spark plug fires only while both the retard and advance breaker points are open. As an aircraft engine speed is increased, the voltage induced in the primary coil of the magneto increases. In a high-tension ignition system, a primary capacitor of too low a capacity will cause the breaker contacts to burn. What components make up the magnetic system of a magneto? Rotating magnet, the pole shoe extensions, and the coil core. Spark plugs are considered worn out when the electrodes have worn away to about 1/2 of their original dimension. Alignment of the marks provided for internal timing of a magneto indicates the magneto is in E-gap position. When installing a magneto on an engine, the piston in number 1 cylinder must be prescribed number of degrees before the top center on the compression stroke. When the switch is in the off in a battery ignition system, the primary circuit is opened. The E-gap is usually defined as the number of degrees between the neutral position of the rotating magnet and the position where the contact points open. Advantages of dual ignition in aircraft engines are a more complete and quick combustion of the fuel. Advantages of dual ignition in aircraft engines are a more complete and quick combustion of fuel, provides a backup magneto system, and increasing the output power of the engine. If it is found that a shielded ignition system does not adequately reduce ignition noise, it may be necessary to install a filter between the magneto and magneto switch. Defective spark plugs will cause the engine to run rough at all speeds. Magneto timing drift is caused by erosion of the breaker points and wear on the cam followers. In a low-tension ignition system, each spark plug requires an individual secondary coil. What will be the result of using too hot a spark plug? Pre-ignition. When timing a magneto internally, the alignment of the timing marks indicates that the magnets are in the E-gap position. What should be used to clean grease or carbon tracks from capacitors or coils that are used in magnetos? Acetone. Capacitance after firing in most modern spark plugs is reduced by the use of a built-in resistor in each plug. Upon inspection of the spark plugs in an aircraft engine, the plugs were found cracked with heavy black soot. This indicates a rich mixture. Shielding is used on spark plug and ignition wires to prevent interference with radio reception. A certain 9-cylinder radial engine used a non-compensated single-unit dual-type magneto with a 4-pole rotating magnet and separately mounted distributors. Which of the following will have the lowest RPM at any given engine speed? Distributors. Aircraft magneto housings are usually ventilated in order to provide cooling and remove corrosive gases produced by normal arcing. Magneto breaker points must be timed to open when the greatest magnetic field stress exists in the magnetic circuit. A magneto ignition switch is connected parallel to the breaker points. When using an electric starter motor, the current flow through it is highest at the start of motor rotation. Spark plug fouling caused by lead deposits occur most often when cylinder head temperatures are relatively low. The amount of voltage generated in any magneto secondary coil is determined by the number of windings and by the rate of collapse of the magnetic field around the primary coil. When testing a magneto distributor block for electrical leakage, which of the following pieces of test equipment should be used? A high-tension harness tester. When removing a shielded spark plug, which of the following is most likely to be damaged? Core insulator. The purpose of staggered ignition is to compensate for diluted fuel-air mixture around the exhaust valve. In an aircraft ignition system, one of the functions of the capacitor is to facilitate a more rapid collapse of the magnetic field in the primary coil. When test instruments could be used to test an ignition harness for suspected leakage, what test instrument could be used to test an ignition harness for suspected leakage? A high-tension lead tester. Hot spark plugs are generally used in aircraft power plants with comparatively low operating temperatures. Which of the following statements most accurately describes spark plug heat range? A cold plug is designed so that the insulator tip is reasonably short to hasten the rate of the heat transfer from the tip through the spark plug shell to the cylinder head. In a high-tension ignition system, the current in the magneto secondary winding is induced when the primary circuit is interrupted. When the ignition switch of a single reciprocating engine aircraft is turned to the off position, the primary circuits of both magnetos are grounded. Why are high-tension ignition cables frequently routed from the distributors to the spark plugs and flexible magnetic conduits? To reduce the effect of high-frequency electromagnetic waves emanated during operation. The greatest density of flux lines in the magnetic circuit of a rotating magnet-type magneto occurs when the magnet is in what position? Full alignment with the field. What likely effect would a cracked distributor rotor have on a magneto? Ground the secondary circuit through the crack. If new breaker points are installed in a magneto on an engine, it will be necessary to time the magneto internally and the magneto to the engine. The capacitor-type ignition system is used almost universally on turbine engines, primarily because of its high voltage and high heat intensity. In order to turn off a magneto, the primary circuit must be grounded. Sharp bends should be avoided in ignition leads primarily because weak points may develop in the insulation through which high-tension current can leak. Which of the following would be cause for rejection of a spark plug? Insulator tip cracked. What is the purpose of a safety gap in some magnetos? To discharge the secondary coil's voltage if an open occurs in the secondary circuit. Which of the following are distinct circuits of a high-tension magneto? Magnetic, primary, and secondary. How does high-tension ignition shielding tend to reduce radio interference? It receives and grounds high-frequency waves coming from the magneto and high-tension ignition leads. What is the approximate position of the rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto when the points first close? Full register. What is the relationship between distributor and crankshaft speed of aircraft reciprocating engines? The distributor turns at 1/2 the crankshaft speed. When performing a magneto ground check on an engine, correct operation is indicated by a slight drop in RPM. What will be the result of increasing the gap of the breaker points in a magneto? Advance the spark and decrease its intensity. What would be the result if a magneto breaker point mainspring did not have sufficient tension? The points will float or bounce. A spark plug is fouled when its spark grounds without jumping electrodes. In a 4-stroke cycle aircraft engine, when does the ignition event take place? Before the piston reaches top dead center on compression stroke. What component of a dual magneto is shared by both ignition systems? Rotating magnet. Capacitance after firing of a spark plug is caused by the stored energy in the ignition shielded lead unloading after normal timed ignition. If an aircraft ignition switch is turned off and the engine continues to run normally, the trouble is probably caused by an open ground lead in the magneto. What is the difference between a low tension and high tension engine ignition systems? A low tension system uses a transformer coil near the spark plugs to boost voltage, while the high tension system voltage is constant from the magneto to the spark plugs. When internally timing a magneto, the breaker points begin to open when the magnet poles are a few degrees beyond the neutral position. What is the result of flashover in the distributor? Conductive carbon trail. Magneto pole shoes are generally made of laminations of high-grade soft iron. When will the voltage in the secondary winding of a magneto installed on a normally operating engine be at its highest value? Just prior to the spark plug firing. The electrical circuit from the spark plug back to the magneto is completed by grounding through the engine structure. When a magneto is operating, what is the probable cause for a shift in internal timing? The cam follower wear and/or the breaker points wear. Ignition check during engine run-up indicates a slow drop in RPM. This is usually caused by incorrect ignition timing or valve adjustment. The numbers appearing on the ignition distributor block indicate the sparking order of the distributor. The purpose of safety gap in a magneto is to protect the high voltage winding from damage. The term reach, as applied to spark plug design and/or type, indicates the linear distance from the shell gasket seat to the end of the threads on the shell skirt. How are most radial engine spark plug wires connected to the distributor block? By use of cable piercing screws. When using an electrical starter motor, current usage is highest at start of motor rotation. In an aircraft magneto system, if the P lead is disconnected, the magneto will be on regardless of ignition switch position. Magneto breaker points opening relative to the position of the rotating magnet and distributor rotor internal timing can be set most accurately during assembly of the magneto before installation on the engine. How is the strength of a magneto checked? Hold the points open and check the output of the primary coil with an AC ammeter while operating the magneto at specified speed. The type of ignition system used in most turbine aircraft engines is capacitor discharge. If a spark plug lead becomes grounded, the magneto will not be affected. When internally timing a magneto, the breaker points begin to open when the rotating magnet is a few degrees past the neutral position. When using a cold spark plug in a high compression aircraft engine would probably result in normal operation. Which of the following could cause damage to the nose, ceramic, or the electrode of an aircraft spark plug? Improper gapping procedure. Which of the following statements regarding magneto switch circuits is not true? In the both position, the right and left magneto circuits are grounded. The magnetic circuit of a magneto consists of permanent multipole rotating magnet. The core is made of soft iron. The spark is produced in a magneto ignition system when the breaker points are beginning to open. A defective primary capacitor in a magneto is indicated by burned and pitted breaker points. When does battery current flow through the primary circuit of a battery ignition coil? When the breaker points are closed and the ignition switch is on. What is the electrical location of the primary capacitor and a high tension magneto in parallel with the breaker points. Ignition check during engine run-up indicates excessive RPM drop during operation on the right magneto. The major portion of the RPM loss occurs rapidly after the switching to the right magneto position. Fast drop. The most likely cause is faulty or fouled spark plugs. Thermocouples are usually inserted or installed on the hottest cylinder of the engine. When using a timing light to time a magneto to an aircraft engine, the magneto switch should be placed in the both position. What is the purpose of using a impulse coupling with a magneto? To produce a momentary high rotational speed of the magneto. End of ignition and starting systems. Propellers chapter. Flyweights on constant speed propellers are generally used to aid in increased blade angle. What unit in a propeller anti-icing system controls the output of the pump? Rheostat. If a flanged propeller shaft has doweled pins, the propeller can only be installed in a given position. How is the speed of a constant speed propeller changed in flight? By changing the load tension against the flyweights in the governor. What is the purpose of an arbor used in balancing a propeller? To support the propeller on the balance knives. The primary reason for careful inspection and prompt repairing of minor surface defects such as scratches, nicks, gouges, etc. on aluminum alloy propellers is to prevent fatigue failure. After proper removal of aluminum blade damage, the affected surface should be polished with very fine sandpaper or crocus cloth. Cold straightening a bent aluminum propeller blade may be accomplished by an appropriately rated repair station or the manufacturer. Which of the following defects is cause for rejection of wood propellers? An oversized hub or bolt hole or elongated bolt holes. Proper operation of electric de-icing boots on individual propeller blades may be best determined by feeling the sequence of boot heating and have an assistant observe the load meter indications. The propeller blade angle is defined as the acute angle between the airfoil section chord line at the blade reference station and which of the following? The plane of rotation. Most engine propeller combinations have one or more critical ranges within which continuous operation is not permitted. Critical ranges are established to avoid severe propeller vibration. Which of the following defects is cause for rejection of wood propellers? Bonding or separation of the trailing edge of the propeller blade. Constant speed, non-feathering, Macaulay, Hartzell, and other propellers of similar design without flyweights increase pitch angle using oil pressure. The blade angle of a fixed pitch propeller is smallest at the tip. Oil leakage around the rear cone of a hydromatic propeller usually indicates a defective spider shaft oil seal. Which of these is true? A mechanic's certificate with a Powerplant rating authorizes the holder to repair deep scars, nicks, and dents on aluminum propeller blades. False. A mechanic's certificate with a Powerplant rating authorizes the holder to perform minor straightening of steel propeller blades. That is also false. What is indicated when the front cone bottoms while installing a propeller? Rear cone should be moved forward. Which of these is true, 1 or 2? Number 1. During takeoff, the propeller thrust pull is greatest if the blade angle of attack is low and the engine power is high. True. Number 2. With the aircraft stationary, propeller thrust is greatest if the blade angle of attack is high and the engine power is high. False. Propeller blade station numbers increase from hub centerline to tip. What method would be used to inspect an aluminum propeller blade when a crack is suspected? Dye penetrant. The primary purpose of feathering propeller is to eliminate the drag created by windmilling propeller when an engine fails in flight. Which of the following is identified as the cambered or curved side of the propeller blade corresponding to the upper surface of a wing airfoil section? Blade back. The centrifugal twisted force acting on a propeller is greater than the aerodynamic twisting force and tends to move the blade to a lower angle. Which of the following functions requires the use of propeller blade station? Measuring blade angle. On twin-engine aircraft, the propeller autofeather system is activated when engine power loss results in propeller thrust drop to a preset value. When preparing a propeller blade for inspection, it should be cleaned with mild soap and water. Ice formation on a propeller blade will produce unbalance and vibration. How does the aerodynamic twisting force affect operating propeller blades? It tends to turn the blades to a high blade angle. Propeller blade stations are measured from the hub centerline. Why is the pulley stop screw on a propeller governor adjustable? To limit the maximum engine speed during takeoff. What is the basic purpose of the 3 small holes, number 60 drill, in the tipping of wood propeller blades? To allow moisture which may be collecting between the tipping and the wood to escape. Vent the tipping. Which of the following statements about constant speed flyweight propellers is also true when referring to two-position flyweight propellers? Blade angle changes are accomplished by the use of 2 forces, 1 hydraulic and 1 centrifugal. During the on-speed condition of a propeller, the centrifugal force of the governor flyweights is equal to the speeder spring force. Longitudinal fore and aft clearance of constant speed propeller blades or cuffs must be at least ½ an inch between the propeller parts and the stationary parts of the aircraft. This clearance is with the propeller blades feathered or in the most critical pitch configuration. Which of the following statements concerning the installation of a new fixed pitch wood propeller is true? Inspect the bolts for proper torque after the first flight and after flying first 25 hours of flying. Propeller fluid anti-icing systems generally use which of the following? Isopropyl alcohol. For takeoff, a constant speed propeller is normally set in the low pitch, high RPM position. A geometric pitch of a propeller is defined as the effective pitch plus slippage. What type of imbalance will cause a two-blade propeller to have a persistent tendency to come to rest in a horizontal position with the blades parallel to the ground while being checked on a propeller balancing beam? Vertical. When operational forces cause the propeller stress on a propeller. What operational forces cause the greatest stress on a propeller? Centrifugal force. What is the primary purpose of the metal tipping which covers the blade tips and extends along the leading edge of each wood propeller blade? To prevent impact damage to the tip and leading edge of the blade. A fixed pitch wooden propeller that has been properly installed and the attachment bolts properly torqued exceeds the out-of-track allowance by 1/16 inch. The excessive out-of-track condition may be corrected by placing shims between the inner flange and the propeller. During which of the following conditions of flight will the blade pitch angle of a constant speed propeller be the greatest? High speed, high altitude cruising flight. Where are the high and low pitch stops of a Hamilton standard constant speed or two-position flyway propeller located? In the flyway assembly. Why is a constant speed flyway propeller normally placed in full high pitch position before the engine is stopped? To prevent exposure and corrosion of the pitch changing mechanism. One of the advantages of inspecting an aluminum propeller utilizing dye penetrant inspection procedure is that it shows whether visible lines and other marks are actually cracks rather than scratches. Repairs of aluminum alloy adjustable pitch propellers are not permitted to be made on which of the following propeller blade areas? The shank. Which of the following is used to correct horizontal unbalance of a wooden propeller? Solder. Blade angle is an angle formed by a line perpendicular to the crankshaft and a line formed by the chord of the blade. What normally prevents a Hartzell compact propeller from going to feather when the engine is shut down to the ground? A latch mechanism composed of springs and lock pins. What operational force tends to bend the propeller blades forward at the tip? Thrust bending force. How is anti-icing fluid ejected from the slinger ring on a propeller? By centrifugal force. Generally, unless otherwise specified by the manufacturer, repairs of nicks, scratches, gouges, etc. on aluminum propeller blades must be made parallel to the length of the blade. The purpose of a three-way propeller valve is to direct oil from the engine oil system to the propeller cylinder. During engine operation at speeds lower than those for which the constant speed propeller control can govern in an increased RPM position, the propeller will remain in the full low pitch position. Apparent engine roughness is often a result of propeller unbalance. The effect of the unbalanced propeller will usually be greater at high RPM. Maximum taper contact between crankshaft and propeller hub is determined by bearing blue color transfer. Which of the following generally renders an aluminum alloy propeller unrepairable? Transverse cracks of any size. The purpose of permanently sealing and partially filling some models of Macaulay propeller hubs with dyed oil is to make the location of cracks readily apparent. In what position is the constant speed propeller control placed to check the magnetos? Full increase low propeller pitch angle. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a feathering propeller that is in the high RPM position when the feathering action is begun? Low pitch through high pitch to feather position. When running up an engine and testing a newly installed hydromatic propeller, it is necessary to exercise the propeller by moving the governor control through its entire travel several times to free the dome of any entrapped air. What operational force causes propeller blade tips to lag in the opposite direction of rotation? Torque bending force. If propeller cones or hub cone seats show evidence of galling and wear, the most likely cause is the propeller retaining nut was not tight enough during previous operation. What is a function of the automatic propeller synchronizing system on multi-engine aircraft? To control engine RPM and reduce vibration. The centrifugal twisting moment of an operating propeller tends to reduce the pitch angle. Inspection of aluminum propeller blades by dye penetrant inspection is accomplished to detect fatigue failure. A constant speed propeller provides maximum efficiency by adjusting blade angle for most conditions encountered in flight. The application of more protective coating on one blade than the other when refinishing a wood propeller may be necessary to achieve final balancing. How is aircraft electrical power for propeller de-icer systems transferred from the engine to the propeller hub assembly? By slip rings and brushes. The aerodynamic force acting on a rotating propeller blade operating at normal pitch angle tends to increase the pitch angle. Propeller blade angle is the angle between chord of the blade and the rotational plane of the propeller. Surface treatment to counter the effects of dye penetrant inspection on a propeller is accomplished by washing off with solvent. The holding coil on a hydromatic propeller feathering button switch holds a solenoid relay closed that applies power to the propeller feathering pump motor. What will happen to the propeller blade angle and the engine RPM if the tension on the propeller governor control spring's speeder spring is increased? Blade angle will decrease and RPM will increase. The pitch changing mechanism of the hydromatic propeller is lubricated by the pitch changing oil. How does the propeller overspeed governor on a turboprop engine decrease propeller RPM? As the oil pressure increases, the servo piston is pushed forward and the feather spring is compressed. If a blade of a particular metal propeller is shortened because of damage to the tip, the remaining blades must be reduced to conform with the shortened blade. Minor surface damage located in repairable area, but not on the leading or trailing edges of aluminum blades, may be repaired by first filing with a riffle file. Which of the following determines oil and grease specifications for lubrication of propellers? Propeller manufacturer's instructions. How is the oil pressure delivery on a hydromatic propeller normally stopped after the blades have reached their full feathered position? Electric cutout pressure switch. What action takes place when a flight deck control lever for a hydromatic constant speed propeller is actuated? Compression of the speeder spring is changed. How can steel propeller hub be tested for cracks? by magnetic particle inspection. The primary purpose of a cuff or on a propeller is to increase the flow of cooling air to the engine nacelle. Removal of propeller blade tips within type certificate datasheet limits when correcting a defect is a major repair. Grease used in aircraft propellers reduces its frictional resistance of moving parts and is easily molded into any form under pressure. This statement defines anti-friction and plasticity characteristics of grease. What is the result of moving the throttle on a Recip engine when the propeller is in the constant speed range with the engine developing cruise power? Opening the throttle will cause an increase in blade angle. What controls the constant speed range of a constant speed propeller? The mechanical limits in the propeller pitch range. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a full feathering constant speed propeller that is in the low RPM position when the feathering action is begun? High pitch directly to feather position. It is important that nicks in aluminum alloy propeller blades be repaired as soon as possible in order to eliminate stress concentration points. When lubricating a hard-seal propeller blade with grease to prevent damage to the blade seals, the service manual may recommend on some models to remove one of the two Zerk fittings for the blade and grease. Remove one of the two Zerk fittings for the blade and grease the blade through the remaining fitting. When the centrifugal force acting on the propeller governor flyweights overcomes the tension on the speeder spring, a propeller is in what condition? Overspeed. Propellers exposed to salt spray should be flushed with fresh water. Which of the following forces or combination of forces operates to move the blades of a constant speed propeller flyweight propeller to the high pitch position? Centrifugal force acting on the flyweights. Propeller blade tracking is the process of determining the positions of the tips of the propeller blades relative to each other. On most Recip multi-engine aircraft, automatic propeller synchronization is accomplished through the actuation of the propeller governors. On aircraft equipped with hydraulically operated constant speed propellers, all ignition and magneto checking is done with the propeller in which position? High RPM. The primary purpose of the front and rear cones for propellers that are installed on spline shafts is to position the propeller hub on the spline shaft. The primary purpose of a propeller is to change engine horsepower to thrust. The thrust produced by a rotating propeller is a result of an area of decreased pressure immediately in front of the propeller blades. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a propeller that is in the high RPM position when reversing action is begun? Low pitch directly to reverse pitch. The angle of attack of a rotating propeller blade is measured between the blade chord or face and which of the following? Relative airstream. The propeller governor controls the oil to and from the pitch changing mechanism. When engine power is increased, the constant speed propeller tries to function so that it will maintain the RPM, increase the blade angle, and maintain a low angle of attack. Which of the following methods is used to straighten a bent aluminum propeller blade that is within repairable limits. Cold straightening only. Propeller aerodynamic thrust imbalance can be largely eliminated by correct blade contouring and angle setting. What operational force tends to increase propeller blade angle? Aerodynamic twisting force. What actuates the pilot valve and the governor of a constant speed propeller? Governor flyweights. A propeller's synchrophasing system allows a pilot to reduce noise and vibration by adjusting the phase angle between the propellers on an aircraft's engine. What are the rotational speed and blade pitch angle requirements of a constant speed propeller during takeoff? High speed and low pitch angle. Which of the following occurs to cause front cone bottoming during propeller installation? The front cone contacts the end of the spline. The front cone contacts the ends of these shaft splines, preventing the front and rear cones from being tightened against the cone seats in the propeller hub. When lubricating a newly overhauled steel hub propeller, you should lubricate the propeller after 1 to 2 hours of operation. The actual distance a propeller moves forward through the air during 1 revolution is known as effective pitch. End of Propellers chapter. Engine fuel and fuel metering systems. An indication that the optimum idle mixture has been obtained occurs when the mixture control is moved to idle cutoff and the manifold pressure decreases and RPM increases momentarily before the engine ceases to fire. The throttle valve of a float-type aircraft carburetor is located between the venturi and the engine. During engine operation, if carburetor heat is applied, it will decrease the air density to the carburetor. One of the things a metered orifice in a main air bleed helps to accomplish at a given altitude in a carburetor is better fuel vaporization and control of fuel discharge, especially at low engine speeds. What will occur if the vapor vent float in a pressure carburetor loses its buoyancy? The amount of fuel returned to the fuel tank from the carburetor will be increased. If an engine equipped with a float-type carburetor backfires or misses when a throttle is advanced, a likely cause is that the accelerating pump is not operating properly. What is the purpose of the carburetor accelerating system? Temporarily enrich the mixture when the throttle is suddenly opened. An aircraft carburetor is equipped with a mixture control in order to prevent the mixture from becoming too rich at high altitudes. A rotary vane pump is best described as positive displacement pump. A carburetor is prevented from leaning out during quick acceleration by accelerating system. Which of the following statements concerning a centrifugal type fuel boost pump located in the fuel supply tank is not true? So the centrifugal type pump is classified as a positive displacement pump. What corrective action should be taken when a carburetor is found to be leaking fuel from the discharge nozzle? Replace the needle, valve, and seats. What component is used to ensure fuel delivery during periods of rapid engine acceleration? Acceleration pump. What is a characteristic of a centrifugal type of fuel boost pump? It separates air and vapor from the fuel. The fuel pump relief valve directs excess fuel to the inlet side of the fuel pump. During idle mixture adjustments, which of the following is normally observed to determine when the correct mixture has been achieved? Changes in RPM or manifold pressure. Fuel is discharged from idling speeds on a flow-type carburetor from the idle discharge nozzle. Float-type carburetors, which are equipped with economizers, are normally set for their leanest practical mixture delivery at cruising speeds and enriched by some of the economizers system at high power settings. On a float-type carburetor, the purpose of the economizer valve is to provide a richer mixture and cooling at maximum power output. To determine the float level in a float-type carburetor, a measurement is usually made from the top of the fuel and the float chamber to the parting surface of the carburetor. If an aircraft engine is equipped with a carburetor that is not compensated for altitude and temperature variations, the air-fuel mixture will become richer as either the altitude or temperature increases. Fuel lines are kept away from sources of heat, and sharp bends and steep rises are avoided to reduce the possibility of vapor lock. What is the possible cause of an engine running rich at full throttle if it is equipped with a float-type carburetor? Clogged main air bleed. When a new carburetor is installed on an engine and the engine is warmed up to normal temperatures, adjust the idle mixture, then the idle speed. If fuel is found running from the carburetor with the engine not running, the likely cause is that the float needle valve is not seated properly. A pilot reports that the fuel pressure fluctuates and exceeds the upper limits whenever the throttle is advanced. The most likely cause of the trouble is a sticking fuel pump relief valve. The back suction mixture control system operates by varying the pressure acting on the fuel in the float chamber. Under which of the following conditions would an engine run lean even though there is a normal amount of fuel present? Incomplete fuel vaporization. A punctured float in a float-type carburetor will cause the fuel level to rise and enrich the mixture. What carburetor component measures the amount of air delivered to the engine? Venturi. A major difference between the Teledyne, Continental, and RSA continuous flow fuel injection systems and the fuel metering is that the Continental fuel system uses fuel pressure only as a metering force. If the main air bleed of a float-type carburetor becomes clogged, the engine will run rich at rated power. The density of air is very important when mixing fuel and air to obtain a correct fuel-to-air ratio. Which of the following weighs the most? 100 parts of dry air. A mixture ratio of 11:1 normally refers to 1 parts fuel to 11 parts air. Maximum power is normally considered to be developed in a Recip engine with the air-fuel mixture ratio of approximately 12:1. A fuel strainer or filter must be located between the tank outlet and the fuel metering device. What carburetor component limits the maximum airflow into the engine at full throttle? Venturi. What is the final authority for the details of carburetor overhaul? The manufacturer's recommendations. Which of the following is least likely to occur during operation of an engine equipped with a direct cylinder fuel injection system? Backfiring. On a carburetor without an automatic mixture control, as you ascend to altitude, the mixture will be enriched. What is a function of the idling air bleed in a float-type carburetor? It aids in emulsifying/vaporizing the fuel at idle speeds. Excessively rich or lean idle mixtures result in incomplete combustion. Which method is commonly used to adjust the level of a float in a float-type carburetor? Add or remove shims under the needle valve seat. The fuel metering force of a conventional float-type carburetor in its normal operating range is the difference between the pressure acting on the discharge nozzle located within the venturi and the pressure acting on the fuel in the float chamber. The economizer system of a float-type carburetor performs which of the following functions? It supplies and regulates the additional fuel required for all engine speeds above cruising. Which of the following is not a function of the carburetor venturi? Regulates the idle system. Where is the main fuel strainer located in the aircraft fuel system? At the lowest point in the fuel system. Which statement is correct regarding a continuous flow fuel injection system used on many Recip engines? Fuel is injected at each cylinder intake port. How will the mixture of an engine be affected if the bellows of the automatic mixture control AMC in a pressure carburetor ruptures while the engine is operating at altitude? It will become richer. Fuel boost pumps are operated to provide a positive flow of fuel to the engine. Recip engine power will be decreased at all altitudes if the humidity is increased. An excessively lean air-fuel mixture may cause an increase in cylinder head temperature. One purpose of the air bleed in a float-type carburetor is to decrease fuel density and destroy surface tension. A fuel pressure relief valve is required on engine-driven vane-type fuel pumps. Which statement is true regarding proper throttle rigging of an airplane? The throttle stop on the carburetor must be contracted before the stop in the cockpit. What method is ordinarily used to make idle speed adjustments on a float-type carburetor? An adjustable throttle stop or linkage. Where is the throttle valve located on a float-type carburetor? After the main discharge nozzle and venturi. If the idling jet becomes clogged in a float-type carburetor, the engine will not idle. Which of the following best describes the function of an altitude mixture control? Regulates the richness of the fuel-air charge entering the engine. What occurs when a back suction type mixture control is placed in the idle cutoff? The float chamber will be vented to a negative pressure area. The metered fuel pressure, chamber C, in an injection type carburetor is held constant throughout the entire engine operating range. When an electric primer is used, fuel pressure is built up by the booster pump. One of the best ways to increase engine power and control detonation and pre-ignition is to use water injection. Select the statement which is correct relating to fuel level check of a float type carburetor. Do not measure the level at the edge of the float chamber. During the operation of an aircraft engine, the pressure drop in the carburetor venturi depends primarily upon the air velocity. Fuel pump relief valves designed to compensate for atmospheric pressure variations are known as balanced type relief valves. When checking the idle mixture on a carburetor, the engine should be idling normally, then pull the mixture control towards the idle cutoff position. A correct idling mixture will be indicated by an increase of 10 to 50 RPM before decreasing. The device that controls the volume of air-fuel mixture to the cylinders is called throttle valve. Idle cutoff is accomplished on the carburetor equipped with a back suction mixture control by introducing low-pressure intake manifold air into the float chamber. The desired engine idle speed and mixture settings is adjusted with the engine warmed up and operating. Select the correct statement concerning the idle system of a conventional float type carburetor. The low pressure between the edges of the throttle valve and the throttle body pulls the fuel from the idle passage. If a float type carburetor becomes flooded, the condition is most likely caused by a leaking needle valve and seat assembly. Which of the following causes a single diaphragm accelerator pump to discharge fuel? An increase in manifold pressure that occurs when the throttle valve is opened. When troubleshooting an engine that will not idle, what would be a probable cause? Economizer valve not operating correctly. The device that controls the ratio of the air-fuel mixture to the cylinders is called a mixture control. How often should float carburetors be overhauled? At engine overhaul. Fuel pressure produced by the engine-driven fuel pump is adjusted by relief valve adjusting screws. Where is the engine fuel shutoff valve usually located? Aft of the firewall. Most large aircraft Recip engines are equipped with which of the following types of engine-driven fuel pumps? Rotary vane type fuel pump. Detonation occurs when the air-fuel mixture burns too fast. The use of less than normal throttle opening during starting will cause a rich mixture. During what period does the fuel pump bypass valve open and remain open? When the fuel boost pump pressure is greater than fuel pump pressure. Where physical separation of the fuel lines from electrical wiring or conduit is impracticable, locate the fuel line below the wiring and clamp the line securely to the airframe structure. Boost pumps in a fuel system provide a positive flow of fuel to the engine pump. What precautions should be taken when putting thread lubricant on a tapered pipe plug in a carburetor float bowl? Engage the first thread of the plug, then put a small amount of lubricant on the second thread and screw the plug in. If the volume of air passing through a carburetor venturi is reduced, the pressure at the venturi throat will increase. What could cause a lean mixture and high cylinder head temperature at sea level or low altitudes? Automatic mixture control stuck in the extended position. A 9-cylinder radial engine using a multiple point priming system with a central spider will prime which cylinders? 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9. The fuel level within the float chamber of a properly adjusted float type carburetor will be slightly lower than the discharge nozzle outlet. What is the relationship between the accelerating pump and the enrichment valve in a pressure injection carburetor? No relationship since they operate independently. The purpose of a back suction mixture control in a float type carburetor is to adjust the mixture by regulating the pressure on the fuel in the float chamber. The function of the altitude compensating or aneroid valve used with a Teledyne Continental fuel injection system on many turbocharged engines is to prevent an overly rich mixture during sudden acceleration. What is the relationship between the pressure existing within the throat of the venturi and the velocity of the air passing through the venturi? The pressure is inversely proportional to the velocity. The primary purpose of the air bleed openings used with continuous flow fuel injector nozzles is to aid in proper fuel vaporization. The purpose of the diaphragm in most vane-type fuel pumps is to compensate fuel pressures to altitude changes. If an engine is equipped with a float-type carburetor and the engine runs excessively rich at full throttle, a possible cause of the trouble is a clogged main air bleed. An aircraft engine continuous cylinder fuel injection system normally discharges fuel during which strokes? All continuously. Under which of the following conditions will the trimming of a turbine engine be most accurate? No winds and low moisture. What is the purpose of an engine-driven fuel pump bypass valve? To prevent a damaged or inoperative pump from blocking the fuel flow of another pump in series with it. At what engine speed does the main metering jet actually function as a metering jet in a float-type carburetor? All RPMs above idle range. Which of the following is true? Number 1 or number 2? Number 1. The mixture used at rated power in an air-cooled Recip engine is richer than the mixture used through the normal cruising speeds. True. Number 2. The mixture used at idle in air-cooled Recip engines is richer than the mixture used at rated power. That is also true. Why must a float-type carburetor supply a rich mixture during idle? Because at idling speeds, the engine may not have enough airflow around the cylinders to provide proper cooling. The economizer system in a float-type carburetor increases the fuel-air ratio at high power settings. The FAA regs require the fuel flow rate for gravity systems, main and reserve, to be 150% of the takeoff fuel consumption of the engine. Which of the following best describes the function of the automatic mixture control? It compensates for changes in air density due to temperature and altitude. Which type of pump is commonly used as a fuel pump on Recip engines? Vane. The fuel systems of aircraft certified in the standard classifications must include which of the following? A positive means of shutting off the fuel to all engines. Fuel crossfeed systems are used in aircraft to maintain aircraft stability. It is desirable that fuel lines have gentle slope upward or downward and not have sharp bends, curves, or sharp rises and/or falls in order to prevent vapor lock. An aircraft engine equipped with a pressure-type carburetor is started with the primer while the mixture control is at the idle cutoff. When air passes through the venturi of a carburetor, what three changes occur? Velocity increases, temperature decreases, and pressure decreases. End of engine fuel and metering systems. Reciprocating engine induction and cooling systems chapter. Which of the following would be a factor in the failure of an engine to develop full power at takeoff? Improper adjustment of the carburetor heat valve control linkage. High cylinder head temperatures are likely to result from a very lean mixture at high power settings. Which of the following is true, 1 or 2? Number 1. Some aircraft exhaust systems include an augmenter system to draw additional air over the engine for cooling. True. Augmenter systems are used to create a low pressure area at the lower rear of aircraft engine cowling. True. What are the three basic regulating components of a sea-level boosted turbocharger system? Exhaust bypass assembly, density controller, and differential pressure controller. When a fire guard is standing by during an engine start, they should be watching for potential fires that could start in the induction system or the exhaust system. During an operational check of an engine electrically powered aircraft engine cowl flap system, the motor fails to operate. Which of the following is first to be checked? Flap actuator, motor, circuit breaker. Carburetor icing on an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller can be detected by a decrease in manifold pressure with a constant RPM. What is used to drive a supercharger? Gear train from the crankshaft. The pressure between the turbocharger and the throttle valve is called upper deck pressure. A malfunction that causes the turbocharger wastegate or controller to fluctuate will cause engine surges due to erratic manifold pressure. Cylinder head temperatures are measured by means of an indicator and a thermocouple sensing device. If the turbocharger wastegate is completely closed, all the exhaust gases are directed through the turbine. Recip engines used in helicopters are cooled by a fan mounted on the engine. The purpose of a sonic venturi on a turbocharged engine is to limit the amount of air that can flow from the turbocharger into the cabin for pressurization. In addition to causing accelerated wear, dust or sand ingested by a recip engine may also cause silicone fouling of spark plugs. During full power output of an unsupercharged engine equipped with a float-type carburetor, in which of the following areas will the highest pressure exist? Carburetor air scoop. If carburetor or induction system icing is not present when the carburetor heat is applied with no change in throttle settings, the mixture will become richer. During ground operation of an engine, the cowl flaps should be in what position? Fully open. Which of the following should be a mechanic console to determine the maximum amount of cylinder cooling fin that could be removed when cracks are found. Engine manufacturer's service or overhaul manual. What is the purpose of a turbocharger system for a small Recip aircraft engine? Compresses air to maintain manifold pressure constant from sea level to the critical altitude of the engine. The differential pressure controller in a turbocharger system reduces bootstrapping during part throttle operation. Bootstrapping of a turbocharged engine is indicated by a transient increase in engine power. When starting an engine equipped with a carburetor air heater, in what position should the heater be placed? Cold. The most common method and generally the best conduction of heat from the inside of a cylinder barrel to the cooling air is accomplished by machining fins directly on the outside of the barrel. A carburetor preheater is not generally used on takeoff unless absolutely necessary because of the loss of power and possible detonation. What is the purpose of an augmenter used in some Recip engine exhaust systems? To aid in cooling the engine. The use of the carburetor air heater when it is not needed causes a decrease in power and possibly detonation. A bent cooling fin on aluminum cylinder head should be left alone if no crack has formed. Which of the following is a function of the differential pressure controller? It controls all positions of the wastegate except at fully open position. Which of the following results in decrease in volumetric efficiency? Part throttle operation. What is the purpose of the density controller in a turbocharger system? Limits the maximum manifold pressure that can be produced by the turbocharger at full throttle. As manifold pressure increases in the Recip engine, the density of air in the cylinder increases. Which of the following defects would likely cause a hot spot on a Recip engine cylinder? Too much cooling fin area broken off. On small aircraft engines, fuel vaporization may be increased by circulating the fuel-air mixture through passages in the oil sump. Prolonged idling of an engine will usually result in foreign material buildup on spark plugs. The primary purpose of baffles and deflectors installed around cylinders of air-cooled aircraft engines is to force cooling air into close contact with all parts of the cylinders. The undersides of pistons are frequently finned. The principal reason is to provide for greater heat transfer to engine oil. What is the function of a blast tube as found on aircraft engines? A device to cool an aircraft accessory. Which of the following statements regarding volumetric efficiency of an engine is true? It is possible to exceed 100% volumetric efficiency of some engines by the use of superchargers of proper type. An engine becomes overheated due to excessive taxiing or improper ground run-up. Prior to shutdown, operation must continue until cylinders have cooled by running engine at idle RPM. How do cowl flaps aid in cooling a horizontally opposed aircraft engine? Controls the amount of air flowing around the cylinders. Using compressor bleed air directed into a nozzle. A vortex dissipator's primary function is to destroy vortices that can suck debris from the ground into engines that are mounted in pods that are low to the ground. In an airplane equipped with an alternate air system, if the main air duct air filter becomes blocked or clogged, the system will automatically allow warm, unfiltered air to be drawn into the engine. What part of an aircraft in flight will accumulate ice before any other? Carburetor. Carburetor icing is most severe at air temperatures between 30 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. One source commonly used for carburetor air heat is exhaust gases. The application of carburetor heat during engine operation will decrease the weight of the fuel-air charge. Where would a carburetor air heater be located in a fuel injection system? None is required. Carburetor icing may be eliminated by which of the following methods? Alcohol spray and heated induction air. Aircraft Recip engine cylinder baffles and deflectors should be repaired as required to prevent loss of cooling. The position of the cowl flaps during normal cruise flight conditions is closed. What directly regulates the speed of a turbocharger? Wastegate. The greatest portion of heat generated by combustion in a typical aircraft Recip engine is carried out with the exhaust gases. Where are cooling fins usually located on aircraft engines? Cylinder head, cylinder barrel, and inside the piston. If a fire starts in an induction system during engine starting procedure, what should the operator do? Continue cranking the engine. The action of a carburetor air scoop is to supply air to the carburetor, but it may also increase the pressure of the incoming air by ram effect. Boost manifold pressure is generally considered to be any manifold pressure above 30 inches of mercury. If an engine air filter element is not routinely cleaned and becomes excessively dirty, it can cause the engine not to start and a loss of engine power. Into what part of a Recip engine induction system is de-icing alcohol normally injected? The airstream ahead of the carburetor. What is the position of the cowl flaps during engine starting and warm-up operations under normal conditions? Full open at all times. When operating an engine, the application of carburetor heat will have what effect on the air-fuel mixture? Enriching the mixture until the AMC can make a compensation. What part of the air-cooled cylinder assembly has the greatest fin area per square inch? Exhaust valve port. A method commonly used to prevent carburetor icing is to preheat the intake air. Generally, a small crack just started in a cylinder baffle may be stop drilled. Cracks in cooling fins that do not extend into the cylinder head may be repaired by removing the affected area and contour filing within limits. An increase in manifold pressure when carburetor heat is applied indicates ice was forming in the carburetor. The application of carburetor heat will have which of the following affects? The mixture will become richer. Increased engine heat will cause volumetric efficiency to decrease. A broken cooling fin on an engine cylinder head may be filed to smooth contours if damage and/or repair limits are not exceeded. The purpose of an intercooler when used with a turbocharger is to cool the air entering the carburetor from the turbocharger. Which of the following assists in removing heat from the metal walls and fins of an air-cooled cylinder assembly? A baffle and cowl arrangement. End of Recip engine induction and cooling systems. This is the end of the video. Note, this is a study guide for the written exam for the Powerplant Recip only chapters. Please watch this study guide over and over again until you have a good grasp of all these questions, and it will really help you during the written exam because you could recall the questions stated in this study guide. Thank you very much, and good luck on your exams.